Jordan. Is Jordan still? There he is.
Good morning, Bill.
How are you, sir?
My question is regards to like the classic banded, like, internal, external rotation, that sort of stuff.
I love them.
I got a couple questions. First off, that's a posterior compressive exercise, right?
Maybe.
Okay, so
hang on. Are you teaching it well? Or are you doing it like the people that don't care?
Oh, I'm gonna say I teach it well,
Okay,
just out of my ego.
So hang on. So let's use that one. Okay. All right. Teach it to me really well.
I'm gonna say from our past conversation, stay as still as possible in the thorax and try to.
Really? Okay, go ahead.
And then try to only move the shoulder and arm.
Where do you want the humerus to be to create an ER representation on the side of the activity?
Humerus to be.
Where do they teach it? When they teach it correctly, do they say pin your humerus to your rib cage?
No.
What do they say?
Do like the little towel.
Okay, what does that little towel do?
A little bit of abduction.
I'm sorry. What was that?
ER space.
So it moves it forward and away from the thorax, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Would that allow us to capture posterior lower expansion? Say yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So step one, we're golden. Okay. All right. And then, am I going to try to rotate through the humerus?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Do I want to pull the scapula towards the spine?
No.
Why would I want to avoid that?
Because that's the opposite of ER space. That's compressive.
So here's what's going to happen if you allow that to, if you see somebody pulling their scapula towards the spine, here's what's going to happen. You get posterior compression, which immediately takes away your ER space, right? It orients the glenohumeral joint into ER, but you're going to get an anterior and a posterior compressive strategy at the same time, because as I pull the scapula back into retraction, the shoulder, the whole shoulder girdle is moving closer and closer to the spine. For that to happen, I have to compress here and compress here at the same time. You just gave them a superficial compressive strategy. You oriented them into ER. They get no glenohumeral motion, which means I get no relative motion of the scapula, and you just wasted 30 minutes of physical therapy. You see it?
Okay, because you
So if you teach it well, you can actually use it to your advantage. It's a non-provocative position that allows you access to relative motions that actually restore your ability to move. It isn't about rotator cuff strengthening as much as it is allowing the body to recapture its relative motions, because frankly, red therotubing is not going to really influence a tremendous amount of force production, but it is going to teach me to recapture relative motions. Do you see how if you do it right, it's very useful? But again, if you don't attend to the details, if you don't attend to the positions, it's not very helpful, because I don't give a rat's patootie what the EMG activity says. What I care about is the positions. What I care about is the intention and then the result. So if I do this correctly with someone, I should see my key performance indicators improve. So I should see improvement in my ER capabilities under those circumstances. Do you see why? Do you see why if you don't attend to the details, if I allow that scapula to compress the DR, yeah, I'm pushing it out there, right? It's going to point in that direction, but it has to point in that direction because I took away all the relative motion that I was trying to recapture in the first place. Okay.
That makes a ton of sense. Wow.
Do you see the difference?
Yeah. And
It
you always,
matters. It
yeah.
matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
The scapula has to move, but it has to move in the right way. I have to have the right starting conditions. Otherwise, I've immediately eliminated my ability to turn, right?
Yeah.
I have to have the posterior lower expansive capabilities. Otherwise, I can't create the relative motion in the scapula relative to the humerus, relative to the thorax, right?
Right. You always see it like going through like as an aide and stuff. You always see everyone's telling them to pinch back and whatnot. And now I'm like, oh wow, okay.
Your scapula could be friends, but they shouldn't meet. Okay. Seriously. I mean, unless that's what you want. Like if you're trying to create an anterior and posterior compressive strategy for force production, by all means, pull your shoulder blades back. That's cool. Right? If you're a power lifter and you're doing a heavy low bar back squat, pinch those suckers together so you get AP compression so you can lift more weight. Okay. If I'm trying to restore motion, right? So here you go. Let me offer you this. If you teach that rubber band exercise that we were just talking about incorrectly, and your goal is to restore shoulder girdle range of motion, so the insurance company will pay you and you're trying to show progress, you just created a strategy, a superficial strategy that interferes with range of motion. And you wonder why you can't recapture your ERs and IRs. Well, it's because you're teaching it wrong. We become our own interference.
Yeah.
Right? By not paying attention to the details as to where this motion should occur, how it occurs. That's kind of important. So now we got to fall back on our representative model. So if you're a lever and pulley person, maybe you can sneak away with it if you execute it well by accident.
Right.
Right. But if you understand where the shape needs to be, now you have an advantage.
That makes sense. Because like half the time, sometimes it works, sometimes you don't. It's always like, I never understood why, but now I do.
Yeah. It does matter. It does matter. So now you understand, it's like, what color TheraBand do you need to use there, Jordan? It's like the one that allows the relative motions to occur if that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But if we just ballpark it into strengthening and we say, oh, look, you can do your side lying external rotations with 15 pounds today, and you only used 12 yesterday, right? And they say, well, then that's better. Wrong KPI. If relative motion is the goal. And under most circumstances, that's why people have discomfort, is because they don't have enough relative motion.
Thank you. That was really helpful. I have a follow-up to that. That's okay. I know we got a few people. I'll wait around. Put me to the back. I'm good.
Okay. All right. Thank you for falling on your sword. I appreciate that.
Can we just take that exercise up to 90 and see how that changes?
What's the difference?
Because you've now moved into more of an IR space at 90, but you're externally rotating. Like how is?
Okay, well, wait a minute.
Are you closing?
Hang on, boss. You're okay. So you have moved the shoulder away from midline.
I got
Okay, hang on. You've got upward. You've got some upward rotation. So you're not getting. So you're not getting full dorsal rostral expansion, but you are getting part of it. Okay. So remember that if you looked at the structure, there, you've got oblique angled muscle fiber, you've got horizontal angled muscle fiber. And so you're going to affect them differently because they pull in different directions, right? And so you're actually going to create the oblique orientation of the scapula under those circumstances. So the ER down by your side and the ER up here are affecting the scap orientation in two different ways. Do you see the difference?
Yeah. It's like the amount of time that we go through, like beginning of baseball season with all the guys reteaching these is astronomical.
Yeah. I would use them rarely. I would say never. I just don't spend a lot of time with it because once you start to recapture the relative motions proximally, and then you start to get the normal scapular motions, then you tend to not have to worry about this too much, right? So again, if I compress here, or I create a position that creates compression superficially, you just created the restriction in ranges of motion. So when you have to reteach those kids when they come back, it's probably because they've been doing a lot of pulling and pushing and stuff like that on their own, right? So they're doing a lot of this and a lot of that, right?
Yeah.
So you're
It's
just
just like trying to take that stuff out of a baseball player's free throwing routine is basically impossible from a team standpoint. So it's like, okay, as long as we're going to do it, let's do it as effectively as possible.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I tell you what, Matt, first thing I would do is I would have the most minimal of tension,
Mm-hmm.
because they're used to high tension, thinking more tension is good, high pressure is good. When the reality is what you're trying to do is you're trying to recapture relative motions, which they got to be able to breathe, they got to be able to move through it, and they need the relative motions available to them. So I would you ever see the yellow TheraBand or TheraTubing that's like spaghetti? You know, it's like, hey, start there. Seriously, just start there. Just teach them the positions again.